Hello and welcome to New Forest Morphs. Today we're talking about choosing and caring for ball pythons, and I'm going to introduce you to the very first ball python that Emily chose when we were together about a year ago. We went down to a reptile shop down in, I think it was near Boscombe, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
And you wanted a pied, and I said I'll treat you to a ball python, and we went into the shop to select, and this little fella, which was probably, how big was he when we got him, Emily?
About 700.
700 grams, and he was an import from Germany, and we looked at him and we fell in love with him straight away, didn't we? There was an instant bond, and I could see Emily was just taken by his patterns, his colours. And what did you call him, Emily? Kylo. So he's one of our most friendliest snakes. But when we got him, the pet shop owners said that he's a bit of a pistol, be careful as you handle him. And when we got him back, Emily, do you remember what happened? Did you actually find he was friendlier than what the man was saying?
Yeah, he was really friendly.
Yeah. And over time, I think you've been handling him regularly, haven't you? You're very fond of him. And I think your handling has helped him become even more friendly. And it's interesting, isn't it? We learn that if you want a friendly pet, you've got to give them some love and attention. You can't just leave them in their viv or in their rub. You've got to get them out and enjoy them. And that's the key to caring for these animals, is to build a bond between yourself and the animal. Now, as I saw Emily was falling in love with him, I think we paid about £350 for him in the end, didn't we? Something like about there. So
probably a bit much for.
It was probably about the right price for a pied. He's a single gene pied, but let's have a look at his marking. So what attracted him to you at the first, Emily? What was your first thing that you liked about him?
I was always like pieds, and Jared really wanted one, so I wanted to make him jealous.
Yeah, Jared, and I think you wanted to breed one and make one yourself, didn't you?
Yeah.
But when we saw him, and he was, I
did want one just as a pet, really, but
yeah,
then it was more Jared who wanted to use the breeding.
Yeah. So originally, and I think that's a good choice if you're going to start the hobby of keeping ball pythons. I think there has to be a natural bond between yourself and the animal, and I think that's really important, because love between yourself and an animal is a natural way of wanting to care for it. And so when we talk about care, the bond you have with your animal is probably one of the most important parts of caring for the animal, and that bond can grow stronger every day that you spend time with your animal. And we have got, since this, we've got 3 or 4 other more powerful males which are pied, and some of them have been very productive for us this year and produced lots of clutches. And I said to Emily, do we still want to keep Kylo because we've got so many other genes and so many other pieds? And what was your response, Emily?
But I love him, so.
So Emily loves him so much she wouldn't even think about selling him. And do you know what? I love to hear that, because I think this is the key to enjoying your animals, is you build up that bond that even if they're not as powerful as other animals, it's not about the power, it's about the animal's welfare and the relationship you have with him. And that's the most important part of this hobby. And everything else is really built off that foundation. So I wanted to just get that out first by using our own experience. And Kylo is now one of the most friendly and docile snakes, which I think credit all goes to Emily, because when he was in the reptile shop, he was a bit scared and frightened, wasn't he? And when we picked him up, he was on the defensive, and you think to yourself, do I really want my daughter to have a snake that's like that? So I took a little bit of a risk, but I knew that Emily's caring nature would help bring about the better qualities out of the animal. So as you give out, the more love you give, the more love you get back. And so thank you, Emily, for teaching me an important lesson. And so yes, that's one of the factors that you have to consider, is caring for the animal, is having that bond. And if you fall in love with an animal, the impulse is to buy it. And of course you've got to be careful that you don't fall in love with every animal and buy every animal, because obviously the other consideration is how much time you have to the animal, because you find that some people that keep animals just keep on buying more and more and more, and then they run out of time for maintaining and looking after those animals, and their care can sometimes drop off. So I would always say start with one and bond with that one animal first before you make any other purchase, is probably good advice. So first of all, that will help you to give that love and attention to your animal, and secondly, you can learn how to care for it, because there's so many things to consider. So let's just think about when you're choosing an animal, Emily. What kind of things do you look out for when you're, first of all, say you have an animal in front of you and you're looking at buying, what would you look at to determine whether or not it was going to be the right purchase for you?
What, as in a snake?
Yeah.
Well, you just gotta make sure, or first off, that it's healthy, doesn't have like any mites or anything, or any
respiration issues. Yeah, you hit two good things there. Now, mites in snakes is quite common, particularly in reptile shops. And my general advice is not to buy from a reptile shop that has mites, for sure. And be very careful going in and out of reptile shops, because they have quite a lot of animals that could have mites, and you could actually carry them back on your clothing and take them into your collection. So you have to be really careful. And so when you're inspecting a snake, there are various things to look for. Now, you do a body check to see if there's any moving mites on the body and any small little dots. Now, the beautiful thing about a pied is, see how white they are? Now, a mite can be so small they can fall behind one of the scales, and you can actually, it won't necessarily be moving, but it might actually be just after its egg stage, and it'll be stationary, and you might think it's a speck of dust. But if you see any very, very small dots on the snake, have a look at them, because they could be mites ready just to get going, and they might even be buried hiding under the scales. So a really good inspection before you commit is absolutely vital. And that's what I recommend you do. Give it a good look over, have a really good study, don't rush into it, don't let your impulse say, yep, we're going to go for it, until you've had a proper inspection. So besides the body, there's other things that can happen to a snake. If a snake's been sat in too much water, or it's been too much humidity, it can cause scale rot. And again, look at the scales. Now look how healthy Kylo is. He's got perfect scales. There's no sign of any rot in him at all, because we've got his set up perfect with his humidity and the way he's being looked after and cared for. He's not sitting in his wee or poo, he's cleaned regularly, and you can see how that manifests itself in the quality of the snake. So again, when you're buying a snake, if you gauge and look at the breeder's setup, that will give you an indication if those snakes are being looked after. And if it's not being looked after, I would be very tempted to walk away, even if you fall in love with the snake. So there's a couple of things. Now, you mentioned something else, respiration issues. Now with, we should just say with mites, if you get one snake with mites, they can be very difficult to get rid of. There are some various things that you can use to get rid of them, and we'll present another video on that topic later in our series. But let's just talk about respiration. How can you tell if a snake has a respiration issue? What are your thoughts, Emily?
Some can like bubble at the mouth, is it? And like dribbling.
Yeah, so if they're blowing bubbles out of their mouth, then they have a respiration issue. Or if they're dribbling saliva or having any excess saliva, then that's another sign that there's a problem with the animal. And also you can listen to its breathing. If it's wheezy or you can hear something which isn't quite right, then it may well have a respiration issue. And respiration issues are highly contagious. So again, if you think your snake has a respiration issue, then I would not buy that snake, because the snake obviously could be carrying that disease and you could wipe out the whole of your collection if you take it back home. So do check for respiration. And the other thing that you can look for is look at the eyes. Now if you zoom in on the eyes are a good indicator of an animal's health. So they should be nice and bright and shining. Other than that, I mean, if a snake's in blue that's going to shed, the reason why it's called in blue is because the eyes go kind of a blue colour. Now that doesn't mean to say that the snake's unhealthy, it just means it's going through its shed cycle. So I want to just put that out, that, you know, just because a snake's got eyes that look like they're covered in blue, it's because they will actually shed their skin, and they'll shed the outer part of their eyelids, their eye as well, and once they've shed, their eyes will then be crystal clear again. So don't be put off. If a snake's in shed, that doesn't necessarily mean to say it's got health issues. That's normally a good indicator. If a snake is shedding, it's growing, and it's a good thing. The other thing is to check to see the skin. See if the previous shed's completely off. You don't want to buy a snake that's stuck in the shed. So if there's bits of skin still on the snake, it means that the humidity of the animal hasn't been kept correctly and the owner hasn't been maintaining and looking after the snake correctly. So again, that's one to avoid. So I think we've covered a lot of the health issues. I always like to ask the question to the breeder, why are you selling the snake? Because that's an important question, isn't it? Why are you selling the snake? If they're selling the snake because they're making lots of hatchlings and it's part of their hobby, then that's fair enough. But if they're selling the snake because there's some underlying issues, then I think it's up to the owner to be transparent with those issues, because those issues could be resolved. But you don't want to be buying a snake that's coming from medical conditions and problems in the past, which might be hidden. And I think it's important to ask the question that, are there any special needs or any issues that I need to be aware of on that? The other thing is the reputation of the breeder is absolutely paramount. So you want to really find out the background to the breeder or the shop, find out how long they've been in business, look at their reviews online, see if they're getting 5-star reviews and any positive feedback, and talk to the community before you buy to make sure that the people you buy from have a really good reputation of looking after and caring, not just for the animals, but also giving the support to the new owners and all the history and everything else that goes with a snake. So you understand the genetics, you understand the parentage, its origin, its history, if it's been line bred, how long it's been line bred for. Because you don't want to take on a snake that's got a weak gene pool because it's been line bred with its ancestors for so long that it weakens the species, the actual genes. So there's lots of things that need to be considered before you buy a snake. Lots of questions that need answering and asking about. Okay, is there anything else, Emily, you can think of that you would consider important before you buy your snake?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay.
Just the little things like how old it is and...
Yes. Now you love babies, Emily, don't you? So size and age is very important. So what happens if you buy a snake from someone who's just had a few hatchlings and it weighs 50 grams and it's only 2 weeks old?
It's not ready to leave yet.
No. Now that's a really important point here. Don't buy a snake that hasn't had consecutive meals and isn't up to a certain size, because the person that's selling it is not caring for the snake. Now our policy here at New Forest Morphs is that we make sure there's 6 consecutive meals that the hatchlings have taken, and they have to have a minimum weight of 100 grams before we even put them on Morph Market or on our Instagram. So if you do see anyone putting in small snakes that don't look right, not old enough, or they look undernourished or underfed, unfortunately you're looking at people that are selling snakes just for the money, not for the care of the animal or the people that they're buying from. So my recommendation is buy from a reputable breeder that has a recognised name in the industry, is well respected, that has high quality genes, and find out where he's sourcing those genes, because you can get a pied and you can get a pied. Now if you get a pied, to give you an example, we just bought a dreamsicle pair this year from a guy called Dave Russian. Now I asked him, we fell in love with the animals, they look beautiful, and I asked Dave, where did you source your original snakes from? And he explained that back in 2012 he took a sire from Justin Kobelka, and he's been breeding his dreamsicles from that lineage. So straight away that made me feel very comfortable, not only because I know Dave has got a very good reputation in the industry, but also that he bought from one of the top breeders in the world, Justin Kobelka, who has a huge reputation for high-end, high-quality snakes. So that tells me that I'm taking quality into my collection, and I will then be able to produce better quality for people that would like to buy snakes from me. So rather than rush in to getting the gene, take your time and look to buy from reputable dealers with good origins and good lineage, and the quality will shine through. Okay, that's very good, Emily. Alright, let's just see if there's any other pointers that we can look at in choosing your snake. Now you talked about size. Let's say you go for a hatchling that's 100 grams. Why is it valuable to you to have an animal from being a decent sized hatchling rather than a sub-adult or an adult? What's the advantage of buying a snake that's probably a couple of months old as opposed to one that's been in an established collection for quite a long time?
Well, you can create a bond with the snake of when you buy it younger, so you can handle it more and tame it.
Yeah. So the bond is with you, isn't it? So the bond that you're buying, if you buy an adult from someone else, that they've already established a bond, which is nothing wrong with that. I mean, I have bought plenty of adults from other breeders, and I've managed to re-establish a new bond with them. In fact, some of them are expecting a lot of love and attention because the owners I bought them from gave them a lot of love and attention. I'll give you a classic example. I bought a pastel clown, which is, where is she? Amber. I could tell that she's been so well cared for that every time I take her out, she wants to spend 15 to 20 minutes with me, and she'll give me a back massage, a neck massage. She goes all over me, and she just basically just wants lots of love and affection, and that tells me the previous owners gave her a lot of love and affection. So understanding what your snake needs is a very important part of caring for them. Okay, so let's just think if there's any other things that we can mention here. So what about talking about the animal again? Check the body of the animal for any kinking, because there can be very subtle kinking in animals, and check their tails to make sure their tails are fully, like this one here for example. Can you see the tip of the tail? Okay, now some snakes, particularly in boob eggs, sometimes don't grow correctly and have kinks, and I have seen pictures of people selling snakes where you get a snake that has a tail that's like that, cut off, and it had a small kink on the end of the tail, and they've cut it off to hide the kink. So I think that's disgraceful. But
sometimes as well, when you get stuck shed on the end of tails, they just fall off from being stuck so much, like the shed
really?
being stuck. Yeah.
Oh really? Okay, well thanks for that, Emily. I never realised that. So that's something to look out for. So we talked about the reputation of the breeder, the quality. We talked about line breeding and genetics, size. Oh yes, the other thing that's really important when you buy your snake is to get a feeding record. So all good breeders keep a feeding record of their snakes, and not just a feeding record, a shed record, a breeding record, a whole bunch of things that they have a log on each individual snake. And when you buy that snake, you should ask for the feeding log and the breeding log and all the data they possibly can give you on the snake. So what's the advantage of actually having a feeding log, Emily? What can you see as an advantage by actually buying a snake with a feeding log?
Just making sure it's eating quite regularly and that it's healthy. Yeah.
So if you've got a feeding log from a hatchling, you can see when it had its first meal. You can see what it's been fed over the months, and you can see what it likes to eat. Because snakes can be fussy, ball pythons can be fussy eaters, so they might like mice, they might like rats, and they might like them at different sizes, and they might like them presented to them in different ways. And so it's very important, I think, when you buy a snake to speak to the owner and say, what is that snake currently eating? How often do you feed it? What size is the prey? And I think the other thing is, particularly when you're buying from Europe, quite a few of the European breeders feed live mice or live rats to their animals. So if you're importing a snake from Europe, it's really important to ask the owners to transfer them from live to defrost frozen if you want to actually feed your snakes defrosts. There's another food source called Maltese, which soft-furred African rats. They're actually mice, but they are very high in protein. They don't smell so much, and they're smaller, but they give off more protein. And some animals, I've got a couple that just like to eat Maltese because the breeders I bought them from were feeding them Maltese. So I've carried on feeding them Maltese. I have converted a few to rats, and I've converted a few mice feeders to rats as well. But one of the issues that new owners have is that they don't study what the animal's been eating. When they get them home, they have 4 or 5 weeks of the animal not feeding, and they're scratching their heads wondering, well, what's going on? Because when you bring the snake home, it takes a week for them to settle in. So really you should leave the snake to settle in before you present anything to it. And then once it's settled in, that's the time to present food to it. If you're having issues feeding that snake, you should have a relationship with the previous owner that you can call them, email them, text them and ask for some help. And that's when quality really does shine through in this service, as you get support from the breeder. So yeah, understanding the log's very important. If you're going to buy an adult or sub-adult snake, let's take a mature adult. Say you want to go straight into breeding and you want a couple of mature females to help you on the way. What kind of questions should you ask about the mature adults you're buying, Emily? Anything you would ask before you buy them to help you with the breeding?
Just age and if it's had a clutch before.
Yeah, so it's important to get their age. So what's the recommended size of an adult female before you breed with her?
I think it's 1,500.
Yeah, so they recommend about 1,500 grams. And what age roughly should the snake be before you start breeding a female?
Not too sure. I think it's more based on size than age.
There's two things to consider here. So they do say a recommended minimum weight of 1,500, but look at body condition. You can have a really long 6-foot female that weighs 2,000 grams, but she's nowhere near back into condition. You would not put a male to that. You'd have to then spend time rebuilding her back into condition. She may have laid a big clutch and maybe she's not back on food, and you've just bought what you thought was a breedable adult, but she's great big long thin snake and she's not in condition, and it'll be dangerous to breed with her. So it's not just the weight, it's also the age and the sexual maturity and the past breeding that's been going on. Now you do find just before the beginning of the next breeding season, now we're in September at the moment, so some people have been buying adult females ready for the new season and they're hoping to put their males to them. The problem you have is that if those adult females are not under condition or in condition, it might take another 6 months to a year before she's ready to go. So I would always recommend holding back, even though the urge is strong to perhaps put a male to her, I would hold back and get her into condition and wait for that condition to be right before you put the male. And when I say condition, obviously the weight's got to be right, she's got to look right, she's got to have some girth on her, she's got to look healthy before you put her to a male. So there's a couple of things to consider if you're buying an adult female. Okay, there's some other things to consider. You've got to look at how much financial resources you have and how much time you have. So if you're going to buy more than one snake, you've got to remember that snakes can become ill, they might need veterinary fees. Imagine if you had 5 snakes and one of them brought in a respiration issue and all 5 snakes went down. Now that could cost you £10,000 or £20,000 in vet fees if the whole collection came down with some serious respiration issues. So when you're committing to buying a snake, you've got to think about the financial commitment. That's why I always say start with one and work your way up. The other thing to consider is also time and your time. So the bigger collection, the bigger time commitment you need to be able to commit to. Now I'm very lucky, I've got Emily and I've got Jared helping me with our collection. We're up to about 100 snakes in a year. Now you might think that's jumping in the deep end, and it probably is, but I mean we've bred about 30 of those and we've probably acquired 60 or 70 ourselves. Because I've got the help of Emily and I've got the help of Jared, it's a pleasure coming in here, it really is a joy. There was a couple of times when Jared was away on holiday where I fed the whole collection by myself over 2 nights, and it took me nearly 4 hours to feed everything. And in that 4th hour, I must admit I was getting tired, thinking I could really do with Jared. But that happens from time to time. You've got to be willing to, but bearing in mind when you feed your snakes, it's normally after 9 o'clock, so you can end up with a late finish, 1 o'clock in the morning. But you've got to be willing to do it. But there are other techniques to help you. You can spread the feeding over several days. You don't have to do a 4-hour session. And like I say, most people start off with 1 or 2 snakes, so normally to feed a snake it normally takes 10-15 minutes max. But we will produce a special video of how to feed snakes and some top tips and some ways of overcoming difficult feeders. I've had a couple of difficult feeders over the years that I've learned how to feed and how to get them onto feed, so we can share some of our knowledge and experience with you on that one on a separate video. So the other question is, do I go for a male or do I go for a female? Now you went for a male, Emily. What caused you to go for Kylo as a male? Why didn't you wait for a female?
I wasn't really into breeding and I didn't really care about the sex, but also weirdly I just get on with male animals.
That's true. There is something about male and female connections, isn't there? And I'm pleased that you did actually buy a male, because you kind of hit the nail on the head there. You've said that if you're going to have a pet, a male or female really doesn't matter that much. I mean, a male, normally the females will grow bigger than the males, although I've got some really big males that are 2.5 kilos, so the males can get big as well. But you find a good breeding male starts off at about 700 grams, and I've got, say, probably several breeders that are between 1200 and 1500 grams. So when you breed a male, they could fast for up to 6 months during the breeding season. So the last thing you want to do is acquire an adult male to breed with, and let's say it's only 500 grams, and he might be sexually mature, but has he got the weight to sustain a long-term fast? So you've got to be really careful, because you can actually jeopardize the life of your snake. So I would always recommend building up your snake to between 700, 800 minimum, and then put him to one female only in the first year, just to see how he gets on with that. Don't overstress him or overwork him, and see how you get on. And if he does the business on the first year, by the second year hopefully you'll put on another 300 or 400 grams, and then you could try maybe 2. So gently ease your males into the breeding cycle. But when you're buying one, make sure you're getting one that is big enough if you decide to breed straight away, 700 grams plus. If you're going to grow him on, then obviously hold back breeding him, but just be careful. Now with a female, you want to be looking at 1500 grams. Now a male can get up to 700 grams in a year, so they can breed within a year, whereas females take about 3 years to get up to 1500 grams. But again, it's all down to sexual maturity. I've heard of breeders breeding within 2.5 years. I've heard of others who've got 2 kilogram females that are 4 years old and they're still not producing a clutch. So every animal will be different, but I think the information we were sharing with you is rule of thumb, roughly rule of thumb ideas there. The other thing is certain snakes, you've got to be aware, have genetic differences. So for example, the spider gene. Now some spiders have what they call head wobble, and they can spiral. Now Jared, his first snake, which is in the bottom, we're keeping it as a pet now, we're not going to breed with her, is a bumblebee. And when he bought it, it was absolutely fine, no wobble. He bought it quite small, but as it's grown, in fact I can show you, why don't I show you the issue. So we're going to keep her as a pet, we're not going to breed with her. I'll just put Kylo back into his hide. Thank you, Kylo, for being with us. There we go. So he's had a good 10-15 minutes of talking about caring for animals. That's one thing I was going to say is there's a mental health for animals. So in other words, you've got to take them out, let them enjoy, let them explore, let them stretch, let them enjoy some quality time. It's very important. So here we've got, let's have a look at her, I think, did Jack call her Coo? Coo. Now this is Coo. Now, this is a, she is a female stinger, oh no, she's a stinger bee.
Yeah.
So what's a stinger bee?
Entry spider.
Is she an entry spider? So when Jared bought this snake, which was about 2 years ago, I mean, she's a beautiful snake. Let's have a look at her.
Try and turn her around so she's not on her back.
Yeah, there we go. Now, look at that beautiful colours. Look at her patterns on her. Isn't she lovely? You see the patterns? Now you can see she's kind of spiraling a little bit already. Look, if I hold her, show you what the problem is.
Normally when they don't find a surface.
There we go. Now look, can you see that she's got spiraling going on here? And when she was bought, she never had that issue. But can you see? And we wouldn't want to breed her because we don't want that genetic genes to go into the offspring, and we don't want to sell a snake that's not quite perfect. We'd like it to be perfect. So she's beautiful and should be kept as a pet. So there you go. So she'll be kept as a pet. She's beautiful and she's got a lovely temperament. She eats fine and nothing wrong in keeping her as a pet, but personally I wouldn't want to breed with her because of the spiraling effect. So there's the spider that a lot of spiders do have that issue, unfortunately. And you should never ever put a spider to a spider because that is fatal. So when you're choosing your animals, even if they look beautiful, be very careful how you pair.
Also, don't put champagne to champagne.
Champagne. Now, do champagnes have head wobble as well?
Not too sure. We don't have any, but they just, if you breed two champagnes together, all of the babies will die.
Okay. So, thank you, Emily. So there's quite a few genes out there you need to be aware of, and we won't go through every single gene, but there was an example of how impulsively Jared bought that snake because it was pretty and he really liked it. He had the bond, everything was fine, it didn't have the genetic problems manifesting itself from day one, but within 6 months it started to have the wobble and it started to spiral, and he was gutted because it was part of the breeding plans, and he's made a very wise decision to keep it as a pet and not to breed, in my opinion. Now there are some spiders that have less wobble. And
we have one, Cleo.
Well, okay, there we go, we do, because Emily fell in love with another spider. Where is she?
You bought it.
Did I buy it?
Yeah.
But you like it, don't you? Where is she?
There, just there, under digit.
Right, yeah, so Cleo. Let's have a look at Cleo. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wash my hands. Now that's the other thing is, when you're moving from one animal to the other, you should really be washing your hands, just in case there is a problem. I mean, our collection's clean, but I like to be precautious. So let me just go and wash my hands. And Emily, do you want to just show everyone? I will take her out and show the difference, but there's your beautiful, there you go, she's looking good. So you can just she just should, hasn't she, Emily?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Now we bought her at about, I think she was about 850 grams from Southampton Reptiles, and she's quite comfortable and happy there. I've just washed my hands. Let's pull her out. And then just look at the difference between this spider and the other spider. Now she's got a slight wobble, but nothing major.
She doesn't ever really wobble.
What would you say? Would you say she's
spiraled a little bit before, but not
majorly? So she might have a minor spiral to her, but she's a beautiful banana spider. She's actually been the mother of one of our clutches. She gave us one egg, didn't she?
Yeah.
She gave us one egg. Now I should probably pick out the baby. If you
she's just a normal banana.
Yeah. So she gave us a female banana. So she's a female maker, so she's very valuable. She didn't give us a spider, but I'll just pick out the baby banana. And he's called Bingo. So let's have a look at the offspring. So Mummy and her baby. So we did breed with her. There's the baby. Look how beautiful the baby is. And we believe she's a female banana. There we go. Now that one's being assist fed at the moment. Jared's been feeding her over the last 3 or 4 weeks because she came in quite small. She was in quite a small egg. Now can you see the difference with this spider? Now look, can you see how much more control she's under?
She does do a bit of a corkscrew.
A little bit of a corkscrew, but nothing major. And that's why we made the decision to breed with her, because, and also it'd be interesting to see how the next generation, we're going to see how that banana, she should be fine because there's no spider in that banana baby.
Yeah, so we won't breed Cleo anymore. But
no. But we can breed her, so we've got a beautiful female maker banana from her. But isn't she beautiful? She's got a lovely temperament, and she's a lovely animal. And she's put on weight now. She's weighing about 1700 grams, so she's got back into condition very quickly. And there's a little bit of movement on her head, but nothing major to worry about. I mean, look, can you see how she's holding her own pretty well? See? So she's doing pretty good. And there's your little baby, look. See your little baby down there? Yeah? That's your mummy.
And that one has het pied in it as well.
Oh yeah, who was the father on that one, by the way?
That was Kylo, or it was, because we put 2 to her, so it was Kylo or what's the other pied called? The cinnamon pie.
Yeah. Okay, we'll just put those back. Let's give the hide back. Now this one's got a hide because it's more confident in the hide, because we want him to feed. We're trying to encourage it to get that confidence level up. So that's why we've given him a hide, or her a hide. Just put her back. Okay, so let's just see if there's any other points that we can cover on care. When you're selecting the gene, I'd recommend 2 websites to go onto. World of Ball Pythons, which gives you a chance to look at all the different genes that are out there, and there's hundreds of different genes. So what I would say is, before you buy your snake, do your homework, do your research. Either come and visit a friend that might have a ball python, have a look at their collection, get a feel for what they're doing. Go and look at a whole bunch of YouTube videos. You've got Billy at Mutation Creation, who's fantastic, cutting 2 or 3 eggs every day, and we're going to get a good selection of genes from that just by watching his videos. If you want to understand about genetics, you've got Royal Balls, Rob. He's the professor who will give you lots on genetics, and there's another guy called Chris Harwick who puts a video out every day, and he literally goes on to the World of Ball Pythons, or he goes on to the Morph market, and he literally produces quite good videos where it takes all the work out for you. He literally puts a picture of a gene, and then he looks at the combinations and how to produce them, and I find that really helpful to be able to understand the genes behind there. And there's lots of really good books out there that you can tap into, so do your research before you even decide to buy your snake. Obviously you can look at friends on Facebook that might be keeping them, they might be a good source. Instagram is a wonderful way of connecting with the community. Lots of good top breeders are on Instagram. But look at all the different media available and try to build up a picture of the kind of animal that you'd like to keep and the one you'd like to go for. Right, I think we've covered most of the points. When it comes to purchasing money, it's good etiquette not to negotiate too silly on the price. I mean, there's always a bit of give and take on prices. So some breeders are very specific on their ads. They say, please do not, this is a fair price, please do not negotiate off that. And I think it's fair to respect that. If you're going to buy 3 or 4 snakes, I mean, in the past I've bought 3 or 4 snakes and I've asked them to do a discount on a bulk purchase, and that's gone down fine, but I've always done it in a way which is respectful. There's a lot of time and energy that goes into making these babies and snakes, and you know, the money that people make on these snakes goes back into the care of the animals, so it's important to be respectful. And all I'd say is, when you're making an offer, please do respect the hard work and effort and the years of commitment these people put into producing such good quality high-end snakes. So our next video, I think that just about wraps up the first one, is our next video is going to look at how to set up and prepare for your first snake. And we're going to go into various details about the equipment you need, how to set it up. One thing I will say is, before you buy your snake, obviously you want to get all the gear that you need in before you buy the snake. You want that Viv, if you're going to go a Viv, or whether you're going to go a rub, a really useful box. You want to make sure that the heat mat and the humidity and temperature are all working and functioning correctly. I would give it at least a couple of days to make sure that everything's functioning correctly, and then when you're happy that all the temperatures and the humidity is working right, that's the time to go out and buy your snake and then bring that home, so it has a nice environment. The last thing you want to do is bring home a snake and be busy trying to set up your snake area, because you want to get that snake into a comfortable home as soon as possible. It may have come on a decent sized journey as well, so it's really important to be prepared. So the next video will go through how to set up. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Emily, for all your help and all your experience in making this care video. If there's any questions you've got, please feel free to put them in the comments box. We'll be happy to answer those. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thumbs up if you like the video, and we'll see you next time.